I'll never forget the first time I met Jack. It was a warm, sunny afternoon in Seattle, the kind of day where the sky seemed endless and everything felt possible. I'd just moved here, trying to start fresh after a rough patch in my life, and I wasn't really looking for anything serious. But then I met him. Jack was standing at the coffee counter in the cafe I'd decided to try, his eyes locked on mine as if he'd been waiting for me. I remember feeling this electric pull, something I hadn't felt in years. He smiled at me, and everything else in that moment faded away. I thought maybe it was just a figment of my imagination. But no, there was something real there. We started talking. And talking. One conversation turned into hours, and before I knew it, we'd exchanged numbers and made plans to meet again. The way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world was intoxicating. I could feel his sincerity in every word. He made me laugh in a way I hadn't in so long. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen. The next few months were nothing short of magical. Jack was perfect, at least. That's how it seemed. He'd text me good morning, ask how my day was going, and tell me I was the most important thing in his life. I felt like I was living in a fairy tale. When we went out, it was like the world disappeared. It was just us, and everything seemed so right. I wanted to believe this was my happy ending. We talked about everything, our dreams, our hopes, our pasts. We seemed to understand each other in a way that felt almost impossible, like we'd known each other forever. Jack told me he had been waiting for someone like me, someone he could trust with his heart. I couldn't believe it. How could someone like him, so perfect, feel the same way about me? The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, I found myself falling deeper. I would lie awake at night thinking about how lucky I was. Jack was the kind of man who made me feel safe and loved, like nothing in the world could hurt me as long as I had him by my side. I thought this was it. I thought he was the one. But as the days went on, there were moments, small little things that made me wonder if maybe it wasn't as perfect as it seemed. He was always on his phone, even when we were together, and sometimes he'd disappear, for hours with no explanation. But when I asked, he would brush it off with a smile, assuring me everything was fine. I convinced myself it was just work, that I was being paranoid. But deep down, something didn't sit right. I tried not to think about it. After all, why would someone as wonderful as Jack lie to me? He had shown me nothing but kindness and love, hadn't he? Then one evening, just as I was finishing a quiet dinner at home, Jack texted me that he had to go out of town for a couple of days for work. I didn't think much of it. He had a demanding job, after all. But when I asked him about it the next day, he seemed a bit too rushed, a little too distant. That's when I began to wonder, was it all really as perfect as I had thought? The days without Jack felt different. I wasn't sure why, but something inside me was unsettled. His messages weren't as frequent, and when we did talk, his answers seemed clipped, hurried. He still reassured me that everything was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the things that were going well in my life, my new job, my friends, my hobbies. But no matter how busy I kept myself, my thoughts always circled back to Jack. He came home a couple of days later, and we had dinner at my apartment. He seemed more relaxed, but there was something in his eyes, something distant. Maybe it was my imagination, but I swore I saw him glancing at his phone more often than usual, his face tense when he didn't respond immediately. I kept my cool, brushing it off with a smile, but inside, I was beginning to feel the cracks in our perfect little world. That night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I couldn't help but notice how he kept checking his watch. "You okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. His eyes flickered to mine before he smiled, his hand reaching for mine. "Yeah, everything's good," he said. his voice soft but hurried. "Just some work stuff. You know how it is." I nodded, though a part of me didn't quite believe him. I had to force myself to breathe, to convince myself that I was being ridiculous. Jack was a busy man, and that was just part of his life. I had to trust him, right? The following weekend, Jack suggested we take a trip to a nearby vineyard for some wine tasting. It was a beautiful day, the kind of thing you'd see in a romantic movie. We laughed, talked, and I felt like we were back to where we were before, the world again revolving around the two of us. I thought, this is it. This was the kind of love I had dreamed about, the kind that felt effortless and full of joy. Jack seemed just as happy, holding my hand as we walked through the vineyard, the sunlight dappling through the trees. But even in that moment of perfection, there was a lingering doubt, a small voice in my head that I couldn't quite silence. Something wasn't adding up. It was later that evening, as we were heading back to the car, when Jack's phone rang. It was a call from an unknown number, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of tension in his face. He stepped away to answer it, talking in a low voice that I couldn't quite make out. I stood there, staring at the car, pretending not to notice the way his posture shifted, his shoulders stiffening as he spoke. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, I told myself, but the feeling in my gut grew stronger. I didn't ask about the call. Instead, we went back to the city, our laughter and conversation slowly fading as my mind raced with questions. Who was calling him at this hour? Why did it make him so uneasy? My heart ached, torn between the love I felt for him and the growing suspicion that something was very wrong. The next few days, Jack acted normal, as though nothing had changed. We continued with our routine, calls, dates, moments of tenderness. But every now and then, I caught glimpses of something unfamiliar in his eyes. He wasn't the same Jack I had met months ago. He wasn't as open, as present. It was as if there was a wall between us, one I couldn't breach. One morning, after a particularly quiet dinner, Jack told me he had to leave for another work trip, this time to Chicago, and he'd be gone for a few days. I nodded, trying to hide the gnawing feeling in my chest. As he kissed me goodbye, I felt a pang of dread that I couldn't explain. Something inside me screamed to trust my instincts, but I didn't want to believe that the man I loved could be hiding something from me. Am I just imagining all of this? I asked myself over and over. I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that my doubts were unfounded. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Then, on the third day of Jack's trip, something happened that changed everything. I was walking home from work when I ran into Sarah, Jack's friend from a few weeks ago. She was standing at the corner near my apartment building, chatting with a neighbor. I had seen her once or twice at Jack's place, but we hadn't really talked much. I waved, and she smiled warmly, waving back. "Hey, Emma," she called, walking over to me. "I've been meaning to catch up with you. How's Jack?" She asked, her smile too wide, too bright. I nodded, feeling a little awkward. "He's good, just busy with work. Thanks for asking." But then, to my surprise, Sarah leaned in a little closer, lowering her voice as though we were sharing a secret. "I'm glad he's okay. He was a little stressed when we saw each other last week. You know how it is with him, always juggling everything." I blinked, surprised by the strange tone in her voice. "Juggling everything?" I asked, frowning. "What do you mean?" "Oh, you know," she said, glancing around as though checking if anyone was listening. "With his family and everything?" His family? My heart stopped. What was she talking about? Did she mean his family? The way she said it made it sound like there was more to the story. Before I could respond, she quickly smiled again, brushing off the tension. "Anyway, I hope things are good with you two. See you around, Emma." I stood there, stunned, my mind spinning. His family? What did she mean? I had to know. I couldn't wait anymore. I had to find out what was going on. The next few days felt like a blur, my mind a constant whirlpool of thoughts, each one circling around that cryptic comment from Sarah. His family. What family? Did I miss something? Was there something Jack had been hiding from me? I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my mind, with his family and everything. Her words echoed in my ears, and I felt like I was drowning in them. It didn't make sense. Jack had never mentioned a family. Sure, he talked about his work, his friends, even his distant relatives, but never a family, a wife, kids, anyone. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat in my apartment that night, staring at my phone. I knew I couldn't just ignore what Sarah had said. If I didn't do something, I would drive myself crazy. I had to know the truth. I found myself Googling Jack's name for the first time. I didn't know why I hadn't done it sooner, but the thought of snooping through his life had felt like a betrayal. Yet now I had no choice. The information was just a few keystrokes away, and I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my head any longer. I typed in his full name and pressed enter, my fingers trembling. It felt wrong, but my curiosity overpowered my reservations. What I found sent a chill through me. There, on a public Facebook page, was a post from a woman who, apparently, was his sister. The post was from last Christmas, showing Jack with a woman, 2 kids, and what looked like a festive family dinner. The caption read, "Happy holidays from our family to yours. So blessed to have such an amazing brother. Love you, Jack." I stared at the photo for a long time, my stomach sinking lower with each passing second. This was Jack's family. But why hadn't he ever mentioned them? Why hadn't he introduced me to them, like he'd introduced me to his friends? My thoughts raced. Was I just another woman in a long line of women he had promised his love to? Was I nothing more than a casual fling to him? I wanted to scream, but I held it in. I took a deep breath and continued scrolling through the photos. There were more. Photos of Jack at family gatherings, laughing and smiling with this woman, and with 2 kids who looked about the ages of 7 and 10. I stared at their faces and they looked so much like him, especially the little boy who had the same deep brown eyes. How had I never seen this side of Jack? I scrolled further, my eyes blurring with tears, and then I found something that shook me to my core. A wedding photo. It was a picture of Jack, standing in a tuxedo, with a woman in a wedding gown beside him. The caption read, "The happiest day of my life. So grateful for you, Emily. Your best day ever." I gasped, feeling as though the air had been knocked out of me. Jack was married. He was married, and he never once mentioned it to me. How could he? How could he keep something like that hidden? And the woman in the photo, Emily, she was clearly his wife. That meant I was nothing more than an affair to him. I had been played, lied to, used. I quickly closed the browser, my head spinning. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what to do. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the truth. Jack wasn't just hiding a little secret from me. He had been living 2 completely separate lives, and I was just one of the lies. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just confront him without knowing more. I needed proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes, to understand the full extent of the betrayal before I said anything. I decided I would follow him. The next morning, Jack texted me to say that he had returned from his trip. He asked if I wanted to meet for lunch. I agreed, though my heart was racing. The anger that had been brewing inside me was hard to ignore. It was as if everything I had believed in was being ripped away, piece by piece. When I met him, I tried to act normal. I smiled, made small talk, and laughed when he told me a funny story about his trip. But inside, I was dying. Every time he reached across the table to hold my hand, my heart twisted in my chest. I was holding his hand, but it felt like I was holding onto a lie. After lunch, he suggested we walk around the city. I agreed, though every step I took felt heavier than the last. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had learned. Jack didn't just have a family, he had a life that I wasn't a part of, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend everything was okay. I decided to follow him. I'd make sure he wasn't hiding anything else. I had to know. I kept my distance, staying behind him as he walked down the familiar streets. I watched him stop at a small cafe, talking to a woman who was clearly not Emily. She had the same smile, the same warm eyes that I'd seen in the family photos. This woman wasn't a stranger. She was a part of his life. His other life couldn't take it anymore. I walked away, my legs shaky, my heart a mess of emotions. Jack was living a double life, and I was just another chapter in his story. That night, I sat in my apartment, replaying the entire day in my head. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep being a part of his deception. I had to confront him. I had to end this. But I wasn't sure how to face the man I had thought I knew. How to look him in the eye and ask him to explain everything. But I would. I had to. The days between my discovery and the confrontation felt like an eternity. I barely slept, my mind constantly running through the possible scenarios. How could I possibly confront Jack without losing everything? I thought I had known him, trusted him, but everything I thought I knew felt like a lie. And yet, part of me still clung to the hope that there was some explanation. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. Maybe I had misunderstood. But deep down, I knew the truth, and I had to face it. That afternoon, after what felt like the longest morning at work, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I needed to do something to escape the madness swirling in my chest. Maybe if I could get some air, I could calm down. Maybe I could think more clearly. I wandered aimlessly through the streets of Seattle, the cool breeze on my face doing little to numb the ache in my heart. I stopped by a park near the city center, a quiet place I'd always found peaceful. I sat on a bench, pulling my jacket tighter around me, but it didn't stop the chill from creeping into my bones. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I noticed her. It was Sarah, the woman who had sparked my suspicion in the first place. She was walking toward me, her steps light, her head tilted as she scrolled through her phone. She didn't see me sitting on the bench until she was almost right next to me, and when she did, she smiled that bright, knowing smile of hers. "Emma," she said, her voice warm. "I didn't expect to see you here." I forced a smile, my insides trembling. "Hey, Sarah. Small world, huh?" She sat down next to me without hesitation, as if we were old friends. I wasn't sure why, but her presence made me uneasy. "How have you been?" she asked, glancing at me with that same curious expression. "I've been okay," I replied, my voice a little tighter than I wanted it to be. "Just, thinking about things." She looked at me with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Anything I can help with?" she asked, her eyes searching mine, almost too intently. I hesitated. I could tell she knew something was off, but I couldn't bring myself to be the one to ask. Not yet. I had to tread carefully. "I'm just, I don't know, a little confused." Sarah tilted her head, her gaze softening. "Confused about what?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "About Jack," I admitted. There it was, the elephant in the room. "He's been distant lately. I just don't know what to think anymore." She didn't flinch. If anything, she seemed almost relieved that I had brought it up. She looked away for a moment, as if weighing her words carefully. "I'm not sure if I should be the one to say anything," she began slowly. "But maybe it's time you knew." My heart skipped a beat. I felt a lump form in my throat. "Knew what?" Sarah sighed and looked at me with a kind of sympathy I wasn't sure I wanted. You're not the only one, Emma, she said softly. Jack, well, he's been living two lives for a while now. He has a family, a wife, two kids. He's been keeping you in the dark about them. My world stopped. The air around me felt thick, as if I couldn't breathe. What? Was all I managed to choke out. Yeah, Sarah continued, her voice quiet, almost as though she was afraid of saying too much. I know it's not easy to hear, but you deserve to know the truth. Why didn't you tell me sooner? The words tumbled out before I could stop them, my voice tinged with hurt and disbelief. She looked at me, her eyes soft and apologetic. I didn't know how to bring it up. It's complicated and I didn't want to get in the middle of it. But you deserve to know. Jack's not the man you think he is. My chest tightened as her words sank in. He's not the man you think he is. I had always felt like something wasn't right, but hearing those words out loud felt like a punch, to the gut. I didn't know what to say. For a long moment, we sat in silence. Sarah seemed to be waiting for me to process the news, and I was too numb to speak. Everything felt surreal. Eventually, I found my voice. How long has this been going on? How long has he been living this double life? Sarah's eyes flickered down to her hands, and she paused before answering. A few years now. It's been hard on him, I know that much. He's tried to keep it all separate, but it's been eating him alive. Eating him alive? I repeated, my mind struggling to make sense of the words. What does that mean? Look, I don't want to get into all the details, Sarah said, her voice low and careful. But it's clear he's torn. He's always had two families, two lives. And while he may care about you, he can't give you what you deserve. Not when he's already promised that to someone else. Her words stung, but they were also a wake-up call. I had been living in a bubble of denial, convincing myself that Jack was the man I thought he was. But now, with Sarah's revelation, the truth was undeniable. Jack had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I felt a wave of anger and sadness flood through me, and I stood up abruptly. I need to go, I said, my voice tight. I need to think. Sarah nodded, standing up with me. I'm really sorry, Emma. I know this isn't easy, but you deserve better. You deserve someone who will be honest with you. I walked away from Sarah, the words ringing in my ears. She was right. I deserved better. And I wasn't going to let Jack tear me apart any longer. The confrontation had to happen. I couldn't wait anymore. I had to face him, no matter how hard it would be. I had to end it. That night, I could barely sleep. My mind was a storm of emotions, rage, confusion, betrayal, hurt. I had spent the entire day wrestling with the truth that Sarah had laid out for me. Jack had been living two lives, and I was just another chapter in one of them. It hurt more than I could put into words. I felt like the ground beneath me had been pulled away, and I was left suspended, dangling in a space where nothing felt real anymore. I couldn't escape the image of Jack, smiling in his wedding photo with his wife, Emily. I kept picturing their kids, two beautiful children, oblivious to the destruction Jack had caused. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that I had been just a temporary distraction in his world, a fleeting moment of passion while he kept the life he had built with someone else intact. I knew I had to confront him. I needed to hear it from his mouth. I needed to understand how he could lie to me like this, day after day. But as I stood in front of the bathroom mirror that morning, staring at my reflection, I didn't feel ready. Part of me still clung to the hope that somehow there would be a reasonable explanation, that maybe I was mistaken or that he truly did care about me, even if everything else was a lie. But deep down, I knew. I knew there was no excuse for this. It was time. I texted Jack, asking if we could meet that afternoon. I didn't tell him why. I just told him I needed to talk. He agreed almost instantly, as if he were expecting it. He probably thought we were going to talk about some minor disagreement or a silly misunderstanding, but what I had to say would shatter everything. We decided to meet at a park near his apartment. It was a quiet place, where he and I had spent some of our best moments, walking hand in hand, talking about the future. I almost couldn't believe I was walking back there under these circumstances. When I saw him sitting on the bench, looking at his phone, my chest tightened. He looked so familiar, so comfortable, so sure of himself. But I couldn't afford to think about that now. He wasn't the man I thought he was. Not anymore. I walked over to him, my steps deliberate, as if I were walking to my own execution. He looked up and smiled, that same warm smile that had once made my heart skip a beat. "Hey, Em," he said softly, standing up to greet me. "You okay? You sounded serious in your text." I didn't smile back. I couldn't. There was nothing funny about what was about to happen. "No, Jack," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm not okay." He frowned, his brow furrowing in concern. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low, gentle. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath and looked him squarely in the eyes. "You lied to me," I said, each word coming out like a punch. "You've been living two lives, Jack. You have a wife, you have kids, and I've been nothing but a secret." His face froze. For a moment I thought he might deny it, but there was nothing he could say. The truth had already been laid bare. "Emma," he said, his voice low and hesitant. Don't," I interrupted. "I saw the pictures, Jack, the family photos, the wedding photo. I know everything now." His face paled, and I saw the guilt flash across his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. Finally, he said, "I never meant for you to find out this way. I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, congratulations," I shot back, my anger rising. "You've succeeded." He stepped closer to me, his hands raised as though he were trying to reassure me, but I pulled back instinctively. "Emma, please," he said, his voice full of desperation. "Let me explain. It's not what you think." I couldn't stop, the tears that welled up in my eyes. "Not what I think? Jack, you've been lying to me for months. You've been telling me that I'm the most important person in your life, that you want a future with me, but you've been married this whole time. You have kids. You've been living a double life, and I've been a part of that lie." His eyes seemed to flicker with guilt, but there was also something else there. Something that looked like shame. "I never wanted to hurt you, Emma," he repeated, his voice almost pleading. "But I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know how to choose between my family and you. It was selfish, and I know I messed up. But I didn't mean to fall for you. It just happened. I never wanted to hurt you." I shook my head, trying to hold back the sobs that threatened to escape. "You didn't just fall for me, Jack. You lied to me. You used me. And now you want me to feel sorry for you?" "I don't want you to feel sorry for me," he said quickly, stepping forward. "I just want you to understand. I was trying to make it all work, but I couldn't. I couldn't keep lying to both of you, and I couldn't let you go." I took a step back, holding my ground. "I don't need your apologies, Jack. You don't get to apologize for this. You've broken my trust in a way I don't think I'll ever be able to fix. I don't want anything from you anymore. I need you to leave me alone." I turned away from him, my heart shattered, but my resolve growing stronger with every step. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't let him pull me back into his web of lies. The last few months had been a fantasy, but now I saw it for what it was, a carefully crafted illusion, and I was done with it. I didn't look back. The moment I walked away from Jack, a strange sense of relief washed over me. My heart was broken, but it was also lighter. I had done what needed to be done, and as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't keep living a lie. The whole time, I had been in love with a man who wasn't capable of giving me the one thing I deserved: honesty. I had hoped for so long that he was different, but the truth was undeniable now. As I walked down the park's winding paths, the weight in my chest began to lift just a little more with each step. But no matter how much I wanted to feel free, I still couldn't escape the painful sting of betrayal. The idea that Jack, someone I had trusted with everything, had kept such a huge part of his life hidden from me made me sick. But I couldn't keep thinking about it. I had to focus on me now. I had to start rebuilding. The next few days were a whirlwind. I threw myself into my work, though it felt hollow. The people at the office knew something was wrong, and I knew they were worried. But I couldn't talk about it. Not yet. Not when I was still trying to process it all myself. It wasn't until the 4th day after the confrontation that I received a text from Jack. It was a simple message, but it hit me like a freight train. "I miss you, Emma. Please let me explain. I know I've hurt you. Please just give me a chance to make things right." I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. My heart told me to ignore it, to move on, to put the past behind me. But the anger inside me flared again, making my hand shake as I typed the response. "No, Jack, there's nothing to explain. You've made your choice, and it wasn't me. I deserve better than the lies." I pressed send, and after a few moments of hesitation, I put the phone down. I couldn't keep getting dragged back into his world of manipulation. He had already had his chance to be honest with me, and he had thrown it away. But Jack didn't stop there. Every day for a week straight, he sent me messages, long, apologetic texts, voicemails, and even a letter that arrived at my apartment. I didn't read any of them. I couldn't. The more he begged for forgiveness, the more determined I became to not give in. I had spent too long in his tangled web of deceit, and I couldn't allow myself to be caught again. I realized then that I had to take control of my life. I couldn't keep waiting for Jack to come around or hope that he would somehow change. I had to move forward on my own, without looking back. One evening, as I sat on my couch, staring at the empty apartment, I called my best friend Lily. She had been there for me through all the ups and downs, and I knew I needed her now more than ever. "Lily, I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice cracking as I spoke. "I don't know how to move on from this. It feels like everything I believed in has been destroyed." She was quiet for a moment before responding, her voice soft but firm. "Emma, I know it hurts. I know it feels like you'll never get over this. But you will. And you'll be stronger for it. You don't need him. You're better than this. You've always been better than this." I let out a shaky breath, the tears finally falling. I thought he was the one. I thought he loved me." "I know you did," Lily said. "But that's not love, Emma. Love is built on trust, and Jack, he didn't give you that. He didn't respect you, and you deserve so much more than that." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "You're right. I deserve better." Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself. I took time off work to travel, something I had always wanted to do but never had the courage for. I went to New York City, then to a small beach town in California, just to clear my head and rediscover who I was outside of Jack's shadow. It was liberating. Every day I felt a little lighter, a little stronger. I also started going to therapy. I had never believed in therapy before, but after everything I'd been through, I realized I needed help processing the emotional damage Jack had caused. My therapist, Susan, helped me rebuild my self-worth, teaching me to recognize my value, independent of anyone else. It wasn't easy. There were days when I missed him, the warmth of his embrace, the way he made me laugh, the dreams we shared for the future. But those feelings slowly faded, replaced by the realization that I was capable of creating my own happiness. I didn't need Jack for that. And then one evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, looking out over the city, I realized something. I had moved on. Completely. I had rebuilt myself, and though I would never forget the pain Jack caused, I could finally see that it was in the past. He no longer had a hold on me. I was free. I wasn't looking for someone else to fix me or make me feel whole again. I was whole. I was enough, just as I was. And that was all that mattered. The process of healing wasn't linear. There were moments when the ache would hit me like a wave, crashing into my chest with an intensity that left me breathless. But with each day that passed, the pain dulled, and I felt myself becoming more whole. It wasn't easy. Nothing about what Jack had done was easy to process. But slowly, I was starting to realize that I was more than the woman he had betrayed. I was more than his secret. Therapy was helping, though I was still learning how to face the parts of myself I had neglected in the wake of Jack's lies. My therapist, Susan, had a way of helping me look inward, asking the tough questions that forced me to confront the way I'd allowed myself to be treated. I had spent so much time trying to be perfect for someone else, trying to be the woman Jack wanted, that I had forgotten what it meant to be true to myself, to be unapologetically me. One evening, after a session with Susan, I found myself walking through the city, just letting my feet carry me. The streets felt different now, new, like I was seeing them with fresh eyes. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel weighed down by my past. I felt lighter, like I was walking with the person I had once been before all of this started. The person who had dreams, passions, and the belief that life could be something beautiful. That's when I ran into Mark. Mark was someone I had known. In passing at work, a colleague I had always admired for his calm demeanor and thoughtful nature. We hadn't talked much, but I'd always noticed the way he listened when people spoke, the way he was genuinely kind to everyone around him. "Emma?" he said, his voice cutting through my thoughts. I looked up, surprised to see him standing on the sidewalk, his hands shoved in the pockets of his jacket. "Mark? Hey, I didn't expect to see you here." "I was just heading home from the office," he said with a smile. "I didn't think I'd run into anyone I knew." There was a pause, a silence that felt comfortable rather than awkward, as if we had known each other longer than we really had. Mark shifted his weight, looking at me with a kind of curiosity that felt genuine. "How are you doing?" I didn't expect the question, but somehow it didn't feel like the usual, polite question people ask when they're really just trying to make small talk. He wasn't looking for a surface-level answer. He wanted to know. I hesitated. It had been a while since anyone had asked me that, really asked me that. I'm good," I said, my voice catching slightly. "I've been through a lot recently, but I'm finally starting to find my way back. It's hard, but I'm getting there." He nodded, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "That's good. I'm glad to hear it." I didn't know what it was about Mark, but something about him made me feel safe. Maybe it was the way he genuinely seemed to care, or maybe it was because, for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like I had to put up a front. I wasn't afraid to let him see the real me, the version of myself who was still healing, but had also come to understand her own worth. "I know this sounds strange," Mark said after a moment, "but would you like to grab a coffee? I've been meaning to catch up, and I think it might help to talk. About whatever you want. Of course." His invitation was simple, unassuming, but it felt like the universe was nudging me in a new direction. I was ready for this. I wasn't looking for a relationship or anything romantic, not yet anyway, but I was ready for connection, for new beginnings. "I'd like that," I said, smiling for the first time in a long time. "A coffee sounds perfect." As we walked, To the nearby cafe, Mark talked about his day at work, casually sharing stories about the people we both knew, but it wasn't long before the conversation turned to me. He asked about my hobbies, my plans for the future, and how I was really feeling after everything that had happened. I found myself telling him about Jack, about the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the journey I'd been on to find my way back to myself. It wasn't easy to talk about, but Mark listened with patience and kindness. There was no judgment in his eyes, no pity, just understanding. By the time we sat down with our coffees, I realized that for the first time since the fallout with Jack, I was actually enjoying myself. I wasn't thinking about the past or feeling like I was stuck in a loop of old emotions. I was in the moment. I was present. "I'm really glad we talked," Mark said as we finished our coffee, a sincere smile on his face. "It's good to hear that you're doing better, Emma. You deserve to be happy." The words stayed with me long after we parted ways. You deserve to be happy. I repeated those words in my mind as I walked home that night, and for the first time in months, I believed them. I didn't need Jack to find happiness. I didn't need anyone else to validate me or tell me my worth. I had already done that for myself. I was learning to love myself again, and that was all that mattered. The next few weeks were full of small, meaningful steps. I started painting, again, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I found joy in the things I had forgotten about during the months I'd been so consumed with Jack. I traveled more. I explored new places, new ideas. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I knew that whatever happened, I would be okay. I had the strength to keep moving forward, no matter what. One day, as I was walking to a cafe, I passed a street musician playing a soft melody on his guitar. The music was soothing, and I stopped for a moment, listening. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace settle into my heart. I had come so far from the woman I was when I first met Jack, the woman who believed in a love built on lies. Now, I was a woman who had learned to trust herself, a woman who knew her worth, and that was enough. It had been months since I'd walked away from Jack, but it still felt surreal. There were moments when I'd wake up, disoriented, and find myself half expecting his name to appear on my phone, his familiar voice filling the empty space around. Me? But then reality would set in. The Jack I had known was gone, replaced by the man who had lied, who had kept so much from me. And the truth was, that man wasn't the one I had fallen in love with. The man I had fallen in love with never existed. And in a strange, painful way, I had come to accept that. But accepting it didn't mean it didn't still hurt from time to time. Healing took time, and I wasn't immune to the ache of loss. But I was stronger now. I had learned how to stand on my own, how to trust my own instincts, and how to embrace my own worth. I was in control of my life again. I had reclaimed the pieces of myself that had been broken and scattered, pieced them back together, and built a stronger, more authentic version of who I was. And yet, as I moved forward, I realized something that I hadn't quite grasped before. I wasn't in a rush to find someone new. I wasn't seeking validation through a relationship or looking to fill the void Jack had left. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was whole on my own. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. It happened one chilly evening, when I decided to join a couple of friends at a local bar for a casual night out. I wasn't looking for anything, just a chance to unwind and laugh with people who cared about me. I had put on a simple, cozy sweater and my favorite jeans, keeping my look low-key. When I walked in, the chatter of familiar faces filled the air. I quickly found my friends and joined them at a table, ordering a drink and trying to push the lingering thoughts of the past to the back of my mind. And that's when I saw him. It wasn't the first time I had met someone since Jack. I had gone on a few dates, but nothing had clicked. Nothing had felt right. But this time, something was different. He was standing by the bar, chatting with a group of friends. His laugh was easy, warm. When he turned around, his eyes met mine, and for a moment, time seemed to slow down. There was no rush, no instant connection to force, just an easy understanding that passed between us. His smile was genuine, a little shy but inviting. His name was Alex. We talked for a while, nothing heavy, just simple conversation. It wasn't until later in the night, after a few more drinks and laughs, that I realized how at ease I felt. With him. He wasn't pushing anything. He wasn't rushing me into anything. He was simply present. And that, for the first time since I had been with Jack, felt like the most refreshing thing in the world. We exchanged numbers, but there was no pressure, no expectation, just the idea of maybe seeing each other again, but only if it felt right. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anxious or guarded. I didn't need to rush to fill the emptiness that had once been Jack. I could take my time, see where things went, and trust that the right person would be someone who accepted me for exactly who I was, someone who didn't need to hide anything. From me, someone who could walk beside me, not ahead of me. In the weeks that followed, Alex and I saw each other more. Slowly, carefully, we got to know each other. There was no rush, no pressure. He respected my space, my time, and most importantly, he didn't try to push me into something I wasn't ready for. He had his own life, his own history, and he respected mine. What I began to realize with each passing day was that I wasn't looking for someone to heal me. I was looking for someone who could share in my joy, my sadness, my growth, and my healing. I wasn't perfect, and I didn't expect him to be. But I wanted honesty. I wanted transparency. I wanted someone who was willing to put in the work, just as I was. With Alex, it felt easy, natural. There was no pretension, no need to impress each other. Just two people who were open, kind, and willing to see where life could take them. But, most importantly, Alex never made me feel like I had to be anyone other than myself. He loved me for who I was, someone who had been through hell and come out stronger on the other side. And I loved him for that. For showing me that there was love after heartbreak, that it didn't have to be complicated or full of lies. It could be simple, and it could be real. One evening, a few months into our relationship, as we were walking through the city after dinner, Alex turned to me and said, "You know, I really admire how strong you are, how you've rebuilt yourself. Not many people would have made it through what you've been through." I smiled, leaning into him. "It wasn't easy," I said softly. "But I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought. And I don't need someone to complete me. I just need someone who's willing to walk with me." His smile grew, and he kissed me on the forehead. "I'm glad to be walking with you." And in that moment, I realized something profound. The healing journey wasn't just about moving on from the past, but about building a future that was filled with love, trust, and authenticity. It was about knowing that I could be enough for myself, and that when I was ready, the right person would walk beside me. No games, no lies, just love. For the first time in my life, I felt whole, and I knew that my future would be nothing short of beautiful, no matter what came next. The story I had once thought was over, with all its heartbreak and betrayal, had turned into a new chapter, one that was filled with hope, possibility, and the promise of a love that was real, and I was finally ready to embrace it.